I'd like to welcome you to my presentation about UI animation and how you can inject some life into your creations. So today my objective is to illustrate the value of animations and demonstrate some examples of well-done implementations. And hopefully I'll be able to persuade you to make this a vital part of your creations and not just a mere afterthought. So what I'm going to be tackling today is, first of all, what is animation? And then 4 benefits of animation. So, what is animation? Well, animation is the process of making the illusion of motion. But what does this mean for us as creators of digital products? John Sherwin, I always mispronounce his name, he's a UXer at Spotify, and he says for him, animation is basically 2 different things. There are 2 categories. One is sparkle animations, and the other one is obvious animations. So these 2 types I will quickly introduce. So sparkle animations are generally animations that look cool, but unfortunately they pull away the attention from what is really important. Like you can see here, all of the glitter in the background is very distractive to the actual action, which is in the right upper corner. And then there's obvious animations. Obvious animations seem natural. They seem so natural that they become almost invisible. Oh, sorry. The animation wouldn't start. Good. Okay. So as you can see here, the focus is on the content. Here in the background, 2 applications change, but you don't notice it because they did it really cleverly. Yeah, so the focus always maintains on the content. That is very important. According to the material design guide, they say motion can effectively help in guiding the user's attention and in ways that both inform and delight. Also, use animation to smoothly transport users between navigational contexts. I will illustrate that now, what this means. So, first of all, animation helps understanding. What does this mean? It means that it provides a visual narrative of, of what is happening, and it explains exactly what is happening because you can see it, and it shows it in a comprehensible, animated way. Yes. Because we all have an understanding how things work and behave in the real world, when UI elements inherit this behavior, it makes it feel natural to us as humans, and it helps us to understand the behavior far more clearly. So for example, if here there was just white dots and not doing anything, or just something that is static, would not have the same effect on us, giving us an idea of what is actually happening. Here we see something is happening in the background. In this case, it's a fun animation that shows the loading process. So Disney was one of the first that created some principles for animations, and they have used them ever since I think the 1930s. They established those principles, and they basically help us also as creators who want to implement animations tremendously, because they also mimic the behavior of objects and elements in the real world. So, yes. So these are some of the principles, and their goal was not to show realism, but an illusion of realism. It's always a little bit exaggerated, which makes it far more interesting for us to look at and to relate to this. It's always a bit wilder than realism, and it doesn't need to be real. But by following those laws, of physics, it marks it, like I said, far more relatable to humans. In the next example, you can see some of the principles that have been incorporated. It's very nicely done because instead of just having a regular bar, for example, it makes it look far more organic, far more alive. And also the little character or the little bubble becomes a character itself by using those principles, by lagging behind and moving forward in an animated way. And with that, like I said, you can make a UI feel far more alive. So now to the second benefit of animations. Animations help navigating. So animations can help us to give the user a clue of where they are in this virtual space that we create and how to navigate around it. One example that I think all of you are familiar with is this minimization of the window. I think it's a very good implementation because the user always knows what is happening on the screen and where this element that the user interacted with went. So it's very clear for the user. You can see it. So yeah, you can see it, not only the user's action, but also the system's reaction. Yes. Another example that I personally love very much, and I think probably most of you also have tried out, is Duolingo, an app, and I think it serves very well as an example of very carefully implemented animations, because this particular one here shows how diving in and out of context. So you have vertical navigation, and then you really go into the context and out of it again. And it's very memorable to the user because the user was guided through this whole experience. And it also eliminates the use for breadcrumbs and similar ways of showing where you are in this navigational context. So this is also a good example for obvious animation. Because it doesn't keep the user waiting for too long and doesn't focus on the animation, but helps in getting from one context into another context, like here. It doesn't distract. And one thing that is also good when it comes to quick and clear animations is, what I mean by clear animations is that the path of the animation is very clear. It's only one direction. And when you have multiple objects moving around, that can only distract and doesn't help in the overall experience for the user. Another example that some of you might be familiar with is the Xbox 360's interface, a little bit of an older interface, but what they've done with animation is that they created a feeling of depth. When you dive in and out of the navigational structure, which kind of simulates a 3D space in a 2D interface. So that's a very clever way of showing this depth with the help of animation. And additionally, it also aids in building a mental map. Where are you in this virtual room? And with animation, you can make this transition also in your head, and you see it visually. Now moving on to the next point. Animation is first and foremost functional. That means it mostly helps us to indicate the status of a system and explains complex information far more clearly than with a static screen. I'll have an example that might delight the developers among us. So the command line interface, I think all of you are familiar, especially developers. Back in the days when animation was not as rich as it is nowadays, and we didn't have the possibilities of CSS3 and all these cool new tools, this was an early way of indicating the status of a system, because you see this little blinking bar, and this is a great way of showing what's going on, that because when it stops blinking, you knew that the system had crashed or something went terribly wrong or something is happening in the background. But when it crashed, it was an abrupt change because you only had this displaying and or appearing and disappearing of this bar. So yes. So abrupt changes take the brain time to register. So it harms the user experience when you have such abrupt changes, because the user has no idea what has happened and, more importantly, how the user should respond to it. And giving little visual clues, for example, with a little transition, this aids the user in guiding the user through this whole experience in a far more clear way. And it's done with simple, small and simple animations like that. So I'm already at the final benefit of animations, that animations delight, or they can be delightful, hopefully. So despite the fact that animation should first and foremost be functional, they should have a function behind it, why we use animations. We as humans love emotions, and we also want to love the things that we work with and interact with on a daily basis. So, for example, I think this is, I took from Tumblr. This is a cool example where you add an element of fun into the whole design, and it's the whole interaction is visually explained what is happening, and this makes the application far more enjoyable to use. In this next example, you see that when the user interacts with the interface, elements start to wiggle around, the bars start to bend, and this is cool because it connects the user's input or the actions and shows a direct reaction of the system, but in a more exaggerated, wild way. But does it have? Do these micro animations have a functional purpose? No, but they're just purely there because they're fun, and it makes, in my eyes, the user fall in love with your creation far more. It builds a emotional connection with your application. Another example is Duolingo, that obviously I mentioned before. It encourages the user to explore, and it also rewards the user by, for example, discovering elements that he or she hadn't expected to see. So through these animations or micro animations, as we've seen before, it's tiny little animations, we can add an element of surprise, and by that exceed the user's expectations, and obviously add delight to the overall experience. This is another small example where you can see instead of a normal loading animation here, they implemented a fun little animation that I think would make you want to reload the animation or reload the page over and over again, just to see this cool animation, to probably the delight of those guys who have to handle the server requests. So now that I've talked about the benefits of animations, here are some tips or takeaways from my side that might help you. So basically, use animations where they enhance the user understanding and overall experience. So don't go overly crazy with multiple objects moving around in multiple directions. It has to help first and foremost, and make them quick and clear, like I explained before. So again, animation should be there to complement the user's understanding of what's going on and not interfere with them. This is very important. And thirdly, keep it simple, because as you've seen, the best animations are those that are invisible, that just blend in with the natural flow. And lastly, consider longevity, because an animation has to still be acceptable after a use of hundreds and hundreds of times. So that's why conceptualizing such small and simple animations is a process that has to be thought through. So, in summary, here are also some points that I think that we've talked about today. Animation aids in user understanding, like I said, because it visually explains to the user what is going on. And animation also helps navigating, because it gives the user clues where he or she is in this virtual space and how to navigate around it. And like I said before, animation is functional because it keeps you visually informed about the status of a system or a specific part. And animation brings joy to a otherwise lifeless and static interface, I believe. So, thank you very much for your time. I hope I've inspired you to implement animations into your creations and make this a part of your project in the future. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Yes?
No question in Lausanne.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions right before lunch? Okay. Then I think, yeah, thank you very much for attending with some initial technical problems, but I hope you've enjoyed it.